Welcome back. On today's video, my microphone's too high, so let's drop that down. We're going to talk about the 5 worst cars I have either owned or worked on. And jumping right in, number 5 on this list is kind of actually a semi-fond memory. It's a 73 Chevy Viewville van. My family had one of these growing up. We bought it secondhand. We bought it with a brand new, or at least a rebuilt motor in the thing. It had a 350 engine in it, which meant this thing was actually reasonably fast when you punched it. Of course, after about 200,000 miles, the fast kind of went away and it became somewhat of a laggard. But this van it was a people hauler. You could pack so many people in this thing, and this was back in the days when seatbelts were more of a suggestion, not a requirement. We had a bunch of people in our family, and we would regularly pack 15 people in this with church groups that we may be involved in, or taking family and a couple of friends other places. It had 2 captain's chairs up front. Then it had a bench row right behind that was meant for 3 people. It had another bench row behind that was generally meant for 3 people, maybe 4. And our family packed another seat back behind that for another couple. That seat was actually not tied down with anything, so the leg room varied with how much stuff you needed to pack in the back of the van, because we could either slide it forward or slide it backwards depending on how much luggage or other stuff that we had in the back. And then you could fit 3 people on that was actually meant for 2. You could fit 5 people in the row in front of that, which was meant for 3 or 4. And you could easily pack 4 on the one that was meant for 3, which meant this thing hauled a boatload of people. The engine was relatively stable, but working on it was a bear, because this was a rear-wheel drive car, so you had to try to, if you were changing spark plugs, you had to access both sides. It had a thing in the middle, a little console that you could pop out. And man, that thing was a beast. Now, I was not part of the final ending of this van, but the story goes that my parents were driving it back home from a trip, and as they were going up a rather large hill in the area, it started backfiring, and backfiring is usually a timing issue, and it's usually just something where you may blow a little bit of smoke, but this thing was apparently blowing flames out of the tailpipe. And as they were going up this large hill, it was several miles long, fairly steep. The story goes that the family was crouching down on the other side of this door by this handle, and they were holding that handle, waiting to have to pop it open should the car catch fire. And finally it died. They had to get it towed. It just wasn't worth being replaced. So it's a semi-fond memory. I drove this thing all over the place. It was rear-wheel drive, not four-wheel drive. In the snow, it handled atrociously, but when you're 18 years old and driving, it's kind of fun to be able to see how many times you can spin that car around. So that is number 5 on my list of the worst 5 cars I've owned, and you can see that it's actually a fond memory. Number 4 is the 2007 Saturn Outlook, all-wheel drive. My wife loved this car. It was one of those people haulers that we got. It was the first non-minivan that we had for the family, and it fit, I believe, 7 people in here. You had the 2 in the front, 3 right behind it on a seat, and actually I believe we had 2 captain's chairs, so scratch that. It was 2, then 2 captain's chairs, and then 3 in the back. So for our family, we had 4 children, and it fit everyone plus a friend that someone was able to bring. Now, the car was actually beautiful. I really liked the interior. The body styling at the time was fine. The problem was this car had a bunch of demons. The headlights we had were HID lighting, which at the time was the highest end lighting you could get. And of course, it had to have a lot of tech behind it, because it wasn't just a light bulb. It had ballasts that were built in. And those ballasts, when they went bad, were about $700. You could find them used for about $300 if you searched around at the junkyards, eBay, wherever else. And they went bad. It was just a known thing. They'd go bad occasionally. They'd go out. You'd have to replace them. And so instead of just replacing a headlight bulb, you're replacing a $700 part. And I think we had to replace 3 or 4 of those. It also had demons with the water pumps. The water pumps had to get replaced. Fortunately, there was a factory quasi-recall on those, and that would get replaced under warranty. But that was an issue, and there was always something that we had to do. It seemed like there was always something that came up. And parts on these were not cheap. They were not easy to find. It was not similar to the other Saturn that we owned that was just bulletproof. So number 4 on my list is the 2007 Saturn Outlook. Now, this was a car my dad owned, number 3. It's the Peugeot 504 Diesel. This car was actually really cool. It was spunky, it was fun. My dad had a thing for European cars, and it had a leather interior. It was a really great car that my dad had bought for business. That was his daily driver. Now, the unfortunate thing where this becomes the worst car is it had a tricky light. It had a short in one of the lights on the dash, and it was the low engine oil light. And in any car, but in diesels especially, your engine oil is the lifeblood of the engine. And he had checked it a number of times, and for whatever reason, one time he just kind of ignored the light and the engine seized because it ran out of oil. Here's where the problem happens. These European cars, the Peugeots, he couldn't find anyone to work on it in a reasonable way, and what was a nice car then became a paperweight sitting in front of our house for some time. And after a while, he just had to sell it at basically a scrap rate because we couldn't find anyone to work on it. So what was a great car, what was very comfortable, fun to drive, became a car that we just couldn't do anything with and became an unfortunate loss for my dad. So the number 3 would be the Peugeot 504 diesel. Number 2 and number 1, you're going to see I really, really don't like. So the number 2 is a car that my friend owned. His family bought a 1980s Audi 4000. And Audis are fun cars to drive. They've got great acceleration, great handling until something goes wrong. And the general consensus on Audis is they're amazing cars until you do have to get them worked on. And the problem they ran into is no mechanic would touch it in the town that we lived in at the time. The general, again, another consensus on Audis is going to be that they're very expensive to maintain and they're very difficult for people to work on until they know how to do it. Now, if you're a mechanic and you know how to work on an Audi, great, you can get great deals on these, kind of like BMWs, but they always had something on this car going wrong and it sat more in their driveway than it actually drove. So Audis in general are a car that I have stayed away from. If you know how to work on them, they're supposed to be fine, but they're quirky and they're different than your standard European cars. So for that reason, and because of my poor friend's experience with the Audi 4000, that is number 2 on my list. Number 1 on my list is a car that I just loathe. It was a 1980s Chevy Spectrum. Now, mine was the 4-door version, and this was an era where Chevy was, and a lot of American cars were experimenting with doing collaborations with foreign cars. So the Chevy Spectrum was prior to the Geo rollout that Chevy did, the GM did. And the Chevy Spectrum was essentially an Isuzu car. And if you actually pop up here on Facebook, this is talking about the Chevy Spectrum was a essentially rebranded Isuzu iMark. And Isuzu engines on the commercial side have been very reliable historically. They're actually decent engines. On the consumer side, mine was a piece of garbage. It was carbureted. The carburetor had been rebuilt several times. I could never get it right. I've actually bought it from a used car dealership in Salt Lake City, Utah. And it never ran quite right. I took it back into them a number of times because they said they had a warranty on it. They could never actually get it to work in a way that was efficient. And unfortunately, that car was the worst car I've ever owned. There was always something wrong with it. It felt like it was built out of just tin foil. It was cheap, and not in a good way. Cheap as in there was always something breaking on it. We couldn't wait for the day we actually sold this car. And this car, because of all the problems we had with it, it led to one of our worst car decisions, which it was a great car, but we financed a car that we never should have, just to try to get out from under this thing. So my worst car, the worst experience I've ever had with a car was a 80s, I want to say it was an 86 Chevy Spectrum. I hope this has been informative, maybe a little entertaining. If it has, please give us a like down below. Consider subscribing to the channel if you like this type of content, as we have a whole bunch of others as well. And if you know someone this may help talk out of buying one of these cars, please do share. Thanks for being here. We'll see you on the next one.